Hello and welcome to Tutorial 1. Today we're going to be creating this basic outline using HTML and CSS. We've been supplied some basic HTML which we will be using here. I'm going to create my index file. You can use your preferred extension, so if you're running this on a web server we'll use PHP. If you're running this locally, it's recommended just to use HTML for now, so rather than .php it will be .html. So this is the code we have been supplied with. I'm going to create another file for our CSS. I'm going to call it main.css. And this is where we're going to store all of the CSS for this particular file. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to be typing out a lot. There's bits and pieces I already know, but what I'm going to be showing you is how to Google essentially, because that's an important part of the process. So we just hop onto Google. The first thing we want to do is importing a style sheet in CSS. Wow, sorry, in HTML. And then we can go here, and this is the line we need, the link, as it explains here. So we're just going to put this within the head, and we're going to change this so that it says main.css. So now those two files are linked. I'm just going to open up this area. Tutorial 1, I believe. And there we are. We've got design example 1 from the title coming across. So this code doesn't do an awful lot right now. We've got the basics set out because the structure of the page is always the HTML. This is what structures it, and then the layout is declared by the CSS. Now if we go back to our task 1 image, we can see that this page is primarily it's primarily design because of the boxes, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the text in. I'm not going to add the all in, but I'll add header, content, side and footer. So I'm just going to go over to the HTML. I'm going to add header, content, side and footer. So this, now if we refresh, we'll have them all on separate lines. And this is the start of where we're meaning to go. Now the first thing to note is that your browser by default applies some styles and preferences, and this is annoying, and all of the different browsers apply slightly different ones. So this is why we use what's called a reset class. You can Google that yourself, or you can do what I'm going to do, which is inside DACCAA UI there is a reset class. So if I'm just going to copy the reset section, and I'm just going to go back and paste it, and this will set some basic things for us. We'll overwrite the font. We're changing the placeholders and we're removing default paddings and margins and everything. So if we refresh the page we won't see any changes because I've forgotten about caching. So there's a quick thing to talk about. If you're using a web server, this is great because we can use some PHP, which is the fastest way to do this. And so what we're doing here is we're saying that the main.css page, we're going to create, or we're going to append to this some variables in a GET request. So what this means is we're not changing the page location, so that doesn't change at all. We're just adding data to it. But the thing is, we're not reading the data. The main.css will never read this data, but it makes it a unique file name, so it won't be cached. And you may say, well, that's inefficient if we're doing it every time, but filemtime will only echo the last time of modification. So if the file hasn't changed since the last time you've loaded it, it will use the cached version. And so we just got to point this to the correct file so we can echo it out. And I can show it you working. Oh, there you are. You've seen it take effect. But you see this string of numbers. That's the modification time just echoed out as part of that. Now, if you're not using a web server, you can go inspect, and then you can hold down, and then you can do hard reload, empty cache, and hard reload, whatever, depending on what you're working on. Hard reload should be sufficient. So that's got the reset class done, and now we've got the content kind of in place. Now, so with the all, this is where we're going to start. I'm going to bring it down so we can see what we're doing, and we're going to write all. So the basic thing to know first is that this is a class, and to refer to it from the CSS we must use a full stop, because a full stop indicates that it's a class we're looking for. You can also use a hash. That would indicate that it was an ID specified like so, pardon me. But an ID is unique, so there cannot be any other instances of that on this page. It's standard practice to use classes, however you can use whatever is more efficient. You can also use HTML types, so we could say div, and every single div on the page would get this class. So we could say div border 1 pixel solid black, and every div would have a 1 pixel thick solid black border. So there are just a few things to note. For this we'll be using the full stop method to get the class, and we're going to start with all. Now the first thing we probably want to do is, if we look at the design, it's centralized. So we want to try and get this to be in the center of the monitor. So the first thing we're going to do is set it to display block, and then we're going to give it a max width of it's up to you. We're going to say like 800 pixels. We can't see anything, my bad. I'm just going to border solid 1 pixel red, sure. That will just allow us to see that now that's been capped at 800 pixels in width. When you set it to well, let's have a look at what I've said. I'd be googling more, so let's W3 schools display block. Let's see what it says about the display properties. So display block displays an element as a block element, like a paragraph tag. It starts on a new line and takes up the whole width. And then inline block is the other one we'll be using. Is displays an element as an inline level block container. The element itself is formatted as an inline element, but you can apply height and width values. So that's another important one we'll be using. So we're displaying this as block, and we're setting the margin to equal 0 and auto, and that will quickly align it to the center. So that's the quickest way to align it. Now I'm going to have a look at what I did previously for the final output, so I can see what we're doing. Yeah, we're keeping it near the top of the page. We're not trying to censor it or anything, so that's good. Now I'm going to go in and say, well, the quickest way to push this in would be to add some padding. So if we remember that padding is on the inside, so I'm just going to give the all a different color, so we can say pink, and you'll see how padding works. So we can see that the outline is there. Now the space between the pink outline and the red outline is the padding of the all. So if we inspect, we can see this is all, and the bit that's green is the padding. Now I'm going to go back, and because I'm going to get rid of the all outline. I don't think we need that for the final piece. Oh yes, but we've applied it to all divs. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to give them all a different color. So we can say header border solid 1 pixel And then I'll use just DACCAA blue because it's a quick one that springs to mind, and then we can say content, border, solid, 1 pixel, AF000, that's a red, and then we can say side, border, solid, 1 pixel, and then we can say lime green, that's an example of a colour that's supported in CSS, and then footer, border, solid, 1 pixel, and we can let's go tomato. And so you can see now there's different ways of referencing colours. You can do RGB as well. You could in here. I'm going to use colour as an example, but that's text colour if you use colour. And so you can set RGB. I'll put RGBA. That's if you want an alpha, so transparency. I'm not sure if it's supported in colour. It should be. I can't see why it wouldn't be. So we could set 000, and that would be black. So now they've all got their own colours. We can refresh and we'll see all the different colours that they have, and the outline has no longer got a colour. So what we know is that the header wants to have some padding. I'm going to add some padding of 20 pixels, and I'm going to add a font weight of bold. So we're going to make the font bold, and so this has pushed this in. And then we're going to want some space between the elements. The quickest way I know is we've got this here to group the two together. So in this we've got the content and the side. And I'm going to put it here, I think. And I'm just going to add some margin to this and say margin 20 pixels, and you'll see that that should push it away. So there we are, we've spaced that, so we've got our header section, and then our content section. Now this is the section on the left, and what we normally do, I'm going to go straight to the side actually because this might be easier, is we're going to say it should have a width of, say, 200 pixels. And if we save that, have a look, we should see that it takes a 200 pixel width, which is perfect. Now these, I'm just going to set these to display inline block to make sure we can get them to display in line. But after applying that, we'll get them next to each other. Now what you will notice is there's a space there, and that's because if we go back, there's a space here. Now in HTML they'll only count one space. Anything over one space will be ignored, so you can use a special tag to do more than one space if you ever need that. You can Google that yourself. But so there's technically a few spaces here, I'd imagine, and that's why they're apart, though. They count in the one space, so you get this space in there. If you didn't want that, you can go back and take this out, put them next to each other. If save, then they're going to be right next to each other. So it's up to you if you want your sidebar right next to your content or not. It's a personal choice. And so what I'm going to just do is come in here, add the paddings that they both want. Oh, as an example of how we could do this, actually, we could say content and side div padding 20 pixels, and that would save us typing this out twice, because what we're doing there is we're referencing both of them, because they're both divs that reside within content and side. So what it will do is your CSS will look through it, will say content and side, and then this is a div, only affect these two. Which is a nice way to save a bit of time when doing stuff like this, if it needs to be applied in a wider capacity. So we're going to set font weight to bold so it matches the header, and then we've got the basis of this done. Now it's up to you, you can choose which you like. So there's 250. What we're going to do here is there's a few ways we could achieve this. This is my favourite way of achieving it. It's a calc method, and so what we're going to do here is we're going to put in 100% minus 250 pixels, and what this will do is it will calculate what 100% of the width of that element, so of the the space allocated to it, it will calculate what minus 250 pixels is of that, and you'll see that this goes perfectly across to the other side. And then for the footer, we're going to add the same margin top 20 pixels, which will push it down. And then we can add the padding of 20 pixels and the font weight of bold. So what I've hoped to have shown you here is a variety of different ways you can achieve things. I've introduced the idea of using the HTML class name with the HTML name with the class, and you can combine them. So these, it will have to look through the stages. So if there's two elements here, it would look for this one first and then this one. If you wanted to do two with the same thing, you could put a comma, and that would do all divs and this. I mean, that's a pointless example, but you can put anything there, and that's multiple, so you can keep stacking them up. Example 2, and you can keep going on, and that would do every one after the comma as if it was a new line. So this is the basic design. You may want to add some height to this, and so there's a few ways you could do that. We could say, let's have a look, because I've already written a solution and I'm interested what the I've got a JS bin file here. So yeah, it's probably worth a note that if you want to quickly test out some HTML and CSS, it's good to use JS bin. It's got a live output, so as you change things, you can see the effect happen immediately. So what I want to just see is what I've done here, and so so I've used that. It's kind of almost a bad technique, but there's kind of a glitch where if you specify a min height, then the child. So a child is, if we look at this as an example, it's probably better actually to go on here. So this is a div, and then the child of that would be content or side, and then the parent of content would be content and side. So this is about the relationship of them. But so we're going to be setting the parent container, which is content and side, to have a min height. Where's content and side? There it is. And so this is what we're going to be using, which is giving it a min height, which means this is the minimum height it can be. It can be only 350 pixels. But then if you were to try and set content and side to have a height of 100%, which would be 100% of 350 pixels or more, then it wouldn't do anything. It would have no effect. But for some reason, if you add height equals 1 pixel, it will always have to be 350 pixels anyway, so you'll get the 350 pixel height, but these will extend to the proper height. So now we can add height 100% to both of these, and we'll get them to extend to that height. And so this is a basic layout. It's up to you if you want more space here, less space here. You can mess around with paddings and margins and as much as you like. If you want these to become to move apart, then maybe you could add 260 pixels and then margin left 10 pixels, and then you'll get that space there. Or if you wanted to match the 20 pixels, of course, you just take that up to 270 and then add the 20 pixels there, and you get the same space all around. And that is how you make the very first wireframe layout. If you want to have you can have it wider, so you can have 1600 pixels, which is a common size to develop with. And you can see that this is how it works, and it should resize a bit because of the percentages. So we're going to have issues here because the side doesn't change, but that's where you'd have you'd go through and find the breakpoints of the website, but we'll cover that in another tutorial. But this is the very first tutorial for how to do a very simple layout.